Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. I know that last week I ended the show saying that I would be pre-recording this week's episode and we'd be skipping the news, but things have, you could say, changed. I heard at the top of last week's show that Game Informer was suddenly shut down by GameStop last Friday, and therefore I am no longer employed, and unfortunately that means all my trips were canceled. And the same situation applies to my guest today. Joining me today is my former coworker and someone who at this point I consider a very good friend, Wesley Leblanc. Wes, how are you holding up?
You know, I am breathing and I'm eating and I'm drinking water, and that's the best I can hope to do in these current times. No, I'm doing okay. It's we're about a week off from everything that happened. I'm starting to come to terms with it. It's still really bizarre and weird, and it sucks the way it went down, but you know, I have nothing but the best memories with the Game Informer crew and working with you, and we'll talk about some awesome memories we made as like a last hurrah together. Yeah, it's such a strange feeling. It's like getting dumped and you just wish that you could be back with that person. I'm like, looking for jobs and trying to find something new. And it's like, I just want my old job back, but it's not possible. But the support and the kind words and everybody reminiscing on Game Informer and, our support with each other, we're all still keeping up it's been really nice and heartwarming to see everything. So, another day goes on.
The outpouring of support really helped me get through that. And also, I was lucky enough that I just serendipitously had a friend visiting from out of town this past weekend. So
yeah,
that was a nice distraction to have. But yeah, everybody who has reached out, whether on the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page, whether on social media, on the Game Informer Reddit, Game Informer Discord, everybody was just so incredibly nice. And, it's been heartwarming to see everybody kind of pour out love for this magazine that we worked so hard on and we loved so much ourselves. I mean, I've said it several times that it's an extra layer of sad that behind all of this awfulness of I no longer have a job, all these people that I care about and love no longer have a job, but also my favorite magazine is gone from existence now. And that sucks.
Yeah. I've been telling people I'm obviously personally sad and socially sad for myself, for you guys, for everybody we're suddenly out of a job. But then also as the media person, the journalist in me, it is heart-wrenching that 33 years of gaming history, a lot of it at the forefront of gaming coverage, especially, way back in the day when Game Informer was doing it like no other. It's just gone, and that sucks. We see it happen so often in all kinds of industries, and gaming is especially bad at archiving its history. And this is just another huge 33-year-old hole that we have now. There's great efforts to archive. I know MinMax has been doing some stuff. Wikipedia has been pretty great about it. Reddit, but it'll never be the same as just loading up a GameInformer.com or something like that.
Or picking up a magazine. God, I'm hoping that my copy of the final issue arrives. We have no idea about the status of that. As soon as that meeting was over, we lost access to pretty much everything and insight into pretty much everything. So I'm hoping that I still get my final issue of Game Informer. That would be really, really sad if I didn't. But yeah, it's just it sucks also, like you mentioned, the website just being gone. I mentioned this on a podcast that is coming out, I think, as people are listening to this tomorrow. I was guesting on a podcast alongside Marcus Stewart and Alex Van Aken. And it's just one of the main currencies that media members trade in is their byline.
Yeah.
So to see that, so much of what we did, I mean, thankfully we are lucky in that we have the physical version. And with that, I'm sure if you're anything like me, Wes, you had PDFs of a lot of your biggest stories.
Yeah.
But the easiest way to do it was to just be like, hey, here's a link to this story that I wrote, and people could click it and see it, instead of being like, hey, like I could ship you an issue, or I can get you a PDF of this, but like, oh, the PDF's too big for your inbox because of like some rule that's on your email. So I
Yeah.
guess I'll upload this to Dropbox, and I hope that your firewall doesn't block it.
Yeah. No, it's so many hoops. And like, same with, I've been using Internet Archive to like post clips, and it's like, that's a whole hassle. And it just doesn't look as clean as like GameInformer.com/whatever.
No.
Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, there was so much on our site.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of preservation, even as I've shifted to like owning digital copies of games. But there are so many times where I will hear a like game is like coming to a new platform, and it's like, oh, well, I've played that so many times, I'm probably not going to play it again, but I'm going to buy it because I want it preserved on my modern console, right? Like,
Yeah.
trying to think of like a good example, but like if a game that I played on GameCube or whatever was finally coming to Switch after being stuck on the GameCube for so long, and it's like, oh, I probably won't play that again, but I want it for my Switch. Like that is something that I will do. I'll plug that
Yeah.
into to the Switch and have it there just so I can preserve it. So it's like it hurts a little extra bit having that be the case of like it's just no longer accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I keep thinking about stories, and I'm like, oh, I wish I had this. And I just don't. And it's painful. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a harsh reality for being a writer and just seeing all your work disappear. Not that like I mean, I don't know. It seems like the internet is destined to get there one day where just everything is lost. But
mhm.
like, yeah, I don't know. I just wish I would have been more proactive in saving my stuff. I mean, every writer, whoever's lost work says that. But yeah, if you're listening and you're a writer, archive everything.
Yes. And I mean, I'm even somebody who I will print out pictures because I'm like, well, what if Instagram just says, oh, we're done and
Yeah.
it's gone? So like I have pictures on my desk over here of like people that I've like met during my time. And like I even have more that I've printed out that I haven't framed yet that just sit on my desks. It's like, all right, well, it'd be nice to have a physical copy of this picture of
Yeah.
like Shigeru Miyamoto and Koji Kondo or whatever.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's it's a bummer for sure. But again, like the outpouring of love and support has really meant the world. And
Hmm.
anybody listening to this show, I really appreciate you because you have given me a reason to continue doing this, even though my profession and my career are kind of in limbo. So, Wes, I'm happy that you were able to join me today because
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
during the main segment, we're going to be talking about kind of our last hurrah, as you put it, going to Japan together a couple of weeks ago. And we can't really talk about the reason that we were there just yet, anyway. Maybe one day. But
Maybe.
we had a good old time, and we went and did a lot of gaming related things, which is
Yeah.
very cool. Um, but I do, before we get to that, we have some news. And then I also want to kick off this episode by announcing that paid tiers on the All Things Nintendo podcast are now live. You can join at the $5 or $10 level and unlock bonuses like admission to the exclusive All Things Nintendo Discord community. Even though it is just a few days old, we already have a great group of folks over there talking about games. And the Patreon's also the way to join the $5 tier to get early and ad-free episodes of the All Things Nintendo podcast, as well as the weekly platform agnostic show, All Things Gamers.
Ooh.
So if that sounds like something you would be interested in and like to partake in, head on over to All Things Nintendo's Patreon page and join up. So that is something that I had long-term plans for. I was like, all right, eventually I'm going to launch these like as paid tiers and like, do bonuses here and there. But with the news coming out of Game Informer and GameStop closing it, I thought, what better time than now than to like accelerate
Yeah.
these plans? So I didn't actually plan on doing an episode of All Things Gamers this week because I was like, all right, I'll just hit the ground running next week. But I had such a solid response from the Patreon community that I was like, you know what, I owe these people a little something here.
That's
So
awesome.
that was
Yeah.
a nice surprise. So if you and I also made episode 0, I'm calling it, available
Mhm.
for all paying patrons. So if you're a $5 level, You can listen to that first episode, and then starting next week, it'll be exclusive to the $10 level. But still, $5 level still gets you access to the Discord. It gets you early episodes, ad-free episodes. So yeah, go check it out. Search All Things Nintendo on Patreon, or it's patreon.com/Brian Shea Podcasts. So Wes, let's jump into this news. How are you doing, by the way, with you've been Game Informer's news hound for a while here, but now you don't have to really pay attention to the news that much. Have you like kind of kept your finger on the pulse? I know there's been a few times where it's like, oh crap, here's this news that I'm seeing on Twitter. I should go share it to the news channel on Slack. And I'm like, oh wait, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I'm definitely still in that urge, and I still have those tendencies. I'm trying to fight them because ultimately it just means being on my phone and computer less, which I'm trying to do outside of like, looking for jobs and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's still there. And it's been a doozy of a week, not so great week of news as well, which is disheartening. But that's kind of just been this year in games. It's wild that like the same week we got laid off was the same week that Bungie went through layoffs, and now yesterday Ready at Dawn closed, which was a pretty prolific studio.
And also shout out to our friends over at Game Explain. They I mean, everybody except for the owner got laid off over there, it seems like. And, I've developed a good relationship with Joey over the course of going to various events over the last couple of years. Seems like a really solid dude. I wasn't as familiar with the other person who was let go, but just a phenomenal team. They put out great content, and it's a shame. Our thoughts are with you. And also like, there's a lot of free agents right now. We should all connect and figure something out.
We should. But yeah, it's been a wild week of news. I'm trying to just ignore it a little bit more, kind of give myself some grace to ignore it. But the urge is still there. I'm still fiending for news.
Yeah, and I mean, last week, somewhat ironically, I had Jill Grote on, and we were talking about the Humble Games layoffs, and I went on this whole tangent about layoffs, and then how much like GameStop laying off people at Game Informer has affected the general flow of the magazine and everything. And then I even uploaded the audio file, and then the next morning we're all laid off, and I'm like, I have to go record like an addendum to the start of the show. So it's been a really, really rough stretch for the games industry, as I've covered on this show so many times. But I think most of the stuff that we're talking about in this news segment is relatively happy. There's one semi-stressful thing, but or I guess quite stressful, but we'll get to that at the end. We have a good story to lead off with here, though, Wes. It's been rare lately, but we have some legit Legend of Zelda news to kick off the news segment. So I don't know if you saw this, but we received the Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom Traversing Hyrule trailer. And, we got kind of a tour of the various regions of Echoes of Wisdom. There's the Central Plateau where Hyrule Castle is. There's Gerudo Desert with ruins and an oasis. And it says there's a lot of mysteries in there, which, that's kind of par for any region in Zelda.
Yeah.
Jabul Waters, which is where Sea Zoras and River Zoras. Remember, I don't know if you dove deep into like the community dissecting like, oh, what's the timeline here? Because like there's like both kinds of Zoras in here.
Yeah.
And, it turns out maybe they both coexist, both the Sea Zora and River Zora. So they're different forms of the Zoras. There's Eldin Volcano, where Kakarika Village is, and it's also where the Gorons live. There's the Farron Wetlands, where the Deku Scrubs live. And then there's also a side quest system. So you can go into your menu, and it lists out all of your acquired quests in the menu, similar to Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. And then the trailer calls out that helping people is a big part of your journey. There are also little like kind of spires almost called waypoints, and they're scattered throughout Hyrule. Once you find them, you can fast travel to them, and you can also call your horse, which will let you run through weaker enemies and hop over short obstacles. And then you can also learn to make a carrot echo, because like a big mechanic in this game is finding objects and then making echoes of them, basically fabricating an object out of nowhere. And you can do this with a carrot, and when you do that with the carrot, it calls your horse to you, which is kind of a cute mechanic.
Yeah.
And then there's also business scrubs, which you may remember from a couple other games. I believe Majora's Mask might be the most prominent example there. will let you turn into things that you found in the world into smoothies. And it kind of seems like a simplified version of like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's cooking mechanics. So
Mhm.
like you can see recipes that you've created and recipes you've discovered. And then the smoothies that you drink also have different effects similar to the cooking in Breath of the Wild. There's also an accessories and outfits mechanic. Like they showed examples of like, there's Zora flippers that give you faster swimming. There's a Zora scale, I think it was, that gives you the ability to breathe underwater. There's another one that gives you a higher jump. And then another one that's like a heart pin that gives you, like when you open up, like when you're out in the world, it gives you more frequent hearts that you find. And then the big thing was that there was the new ability called Bind, and it almost looks like Ultra Hand, but
Yeah, it
rather
looks
than
exactly like
yeah,
Ultraman.
exactly. But rather than like manipulating the object and like being able to attach it to other objects, it binds with Zelda and then follows her movement exactly. So the
Yeah.
example they gave was like a giant boulder was in the way of a switch, and like you couldn't destroy it, you couldn't do anything. Like you were just kind of stuck there. So Zelda bound it to her and then walked along a path and then dropped the boulder off a cliff. And they also showed very much like Ultra Hand or Magnesis in Breath of the Wild. You could use that to pull a treasure chest out of the dirt. And then you can also even bind yourself to enemies and push them off cliffs and stuff. There's also reverse bind, which makes it so Zelda follows the movement of the object that she binds to. So, for example, she used reverse bind to follow the movement of a platform. Like there was like a gap that she couldn't get across, and there was a moving platform. So she bound herself to it and then followed it rather than it following her. And then there's another one where it's like she was on like a cliffside and she bound herself to a bird, and the bird took off and flew, and she could fly with it. So there's some pretty cool mechanics at play. You can also use both bind and reverse bind on your echoes, which seems like it's just like all kinds of creative things. So you can just like, um, like spawn a thing into the world for its movement properties, bind yourself to it, and then do it. And like they gave an example of like this spider. Like she
Mhm.
like spawned a spider into the world. She used bind on it, moved it up to a wall, and then it started climbing up the wall. So she bound herself, did the reverse bind, and she followed it up there. And then she bound herself to it again. This is very confusing. But basically she took control of it, moved it in front of a wall. It took control of her, moved her up the wall, traded back, moved it to another wall, and then kept going that way. So it seems like you can get quite creative with it. Where are you at with this? I see some people feeling like they aren't as excited about this one because it doesn't have like straightforward combat. But I would almost argue that the 2D games in the Zelda franchise, like the combat isn't the highlight as much as like the
Yeah.
exploration and puzzle solving. Like 3D Zelda, I get it. Like I love the combat and like Wind Waker and Tears of the Kingdom and stuff like that. But how are you feeling about Echoes of Wisdom?
I'm pretty excited. It looks like all the stuff you just mentioned and watching the trailer. Uh, in my head, I can just think of all the many ways they're going to use this for puzzles, and
Mm-hmm.
they have some of the best puzzles. I think like the one thing I want to know that would like really sell my hype is like what the dungeons are like. It seems like these are going to be traditional Zelda dungeons, given all the mechanics at play here. And if it was like a traditional 2D Zelda game, I'd be very very stoked. The combat thing is not. I'm not really that. Yeah, like you mentioned, that's more of a 3D Zelda thing where I think that shines. And then on top of all of that, I'm especially excited to see how this connects to, if at all, connects to Link to the Past, because there's like a lot of clues with, especially with the overworld map that they showed little glimpses of, and it's like this seems either set on the same map or set in some timeline away from that. Like it's, I don't know, the connection seems to be Link to the Past if it's connecting at all to any prior Zelda game other than Tears of the Kingdom. And that really excites me because Link to the Past was the first Zelda I played. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have any complaints with this game. It looks great, and I can't wait.
Man, it looks so good. I am all in. And like, it comes out September 26th, so like we're a month and a half away from this thing,
Yeah,
which is wild. Like I can't believe we're so close to this brand new Zelda game. And like this is like our first meaningful look at it since the direct announcement.
yeah. I mean, we're probably September directs are usually a thing, right? I
Maybe,
f-
but I think it might be a little bit different this year because I feel like they're going to do kind of some like, maybe holding their cards close to their chest with the Switch 2 kind of on the horizon.
Yeah.
I think that our next direct is going to be like the first details of the Switch 2 and maybe a couple of details about like the upcoming games, but I don't know. Maybe they'll do like what Xbox has done with like some of their like E3 and Summer Game Fest press conferences where they're like, all right, here's like all these games that are coming out this holiday season, and then next summer you have this to look forward to, and it's just like a teaser for their new console. Because you know they were very, very particular at the June Direct where they were like, this is not going to have any information about the next Nintendo platform. It is just going to be about games coming out. So that might indicate that they could have a Direct coming in like before the end of the year that is going to actually have information about the next Nintendo platform. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's true.
It's always difficult to predict what they're going to do.
Yeah, I'm in a weird spot with Switch where now that it's like coming to an end, I'm looking at games I haven't beaten on Switch, and I'm like, I should do that. But then I'm also like, what if it plays better on Switch 2, and then I have an even better experience? So I'm like, I keep talking myself out of playing games, and then I'm like, I should play that game, and I just keep going back and forth.
Live in the moment, Wes. If this past week has taught us anything, it's
I know.
appreciate today. Don't worry about tomorrow.
I know. It's funny. You know what the cruelest thing about this layoff is, like, for a moment I was like, you know what, maybe I'll catch up on some games and take some time off. But I've just hit the ground running so hard trying to like find what's next, because you know that's kind of how it goes when you're unemployed. I've played less games in the past couple days than usual. That's also because playing games feels just weird right now and like kind of depressing. But yeah, I do need to live in the moment and play some games. You're right.
Yeah, I've played so few games over the past week. I played a little bit of College Football 25, and I was like, I'm not really in the mood to play this. I created my coach and you know, set up a recruiting board, and then I played one game, and I'm like, I think that's all I need right now, even though it's a good game. And then I played another game that I'm going to talk a little bit about at the start of the main segment. But yeah, like outside of that, gaming has not been like a huge priority for me this week. And I made a joke to my partner yesterday. I was like, I think I'm working more now because like I've been like setting things up over on the All Things Nintendo Patreon page. I've been sending out feelers to like contacts that I have, asking like about like, you know, opportunities or like freelancing stuff. And it's like, man, I feel like I'm hustling more now, even though I don't have a full-time job. I'm like, I remember thinking like when the layoffs happened, I was all right, at least now I have to take a break. Like I was burnt out for probably about 5 years. And, you know, at least now I have to take a break. And now I'm just like, oh, well, so much for that.
Yeah, it's tough. It's
but
our industry is very go, go, go. You just have to like strike. So it's hard to take breaks.
I do plan on taking a couple of days of just doing nothing. Like even yesterday when I set up the All Things Nintendo like Patreon page, not set up the Patreon page, but I did like the first episode of All Things Gamers, which is the platform agnostic show that's exclusive to $10 patrons. I was like, I'm just going to sit here. Like I made myself a nice breakfast and I just sat and watched like YouTube for 2 hours. And I was like, this is kind of nice. And then it's like, all right, now I got to go do stuff everywhere. Like, you know, all kinds of stuff around the house. And then also like, you know, work related stuff. So I am going to take a couple of like quote unquote vacation days just to like get my mind right and like, you know, kind of reset a little bit because I don't feel like I've fully processed everything just yet. But yeah, one of those games that I'm probably going to spend a lot of time playing is one that I've been spending a lot of time playing when I was employed because I was traveling everywhere. And this was one of my go-to plane games, Balatro. And, you know, I've talked a lot about it on this podcast and not a lot of it has been news because ever since it came out, it's just kind of been like, oh yeah, I'm playing this game because it's awesome. One of my favorite games of the year, but developer Local Thunk revealed that it has sold 2 million copies since it launched earlier this year. But they also said to celebrate that, we're going to get a first is the key word here, first major gameplay update for Balatro in 2025. Developer says that the update will add new ideas and strategies to the game and will be completely free as a token of appreciation to the community, especially because of, you know, being announced to coincide with that sales milestone. So I don't know what to think about this because Balatro never really struck me as an incomplete game.
Yeah.
But that really makes me interested to see what additions they will bring with this first update. I mean, I never got all the way to the end of like unlocking all the decks and everything, so I don't even know like, are there new mechanics that unlock later on? Wes, did you ever check it out?
I haven't. No, that was we've talked about it a bunch on this show,
Yeah.
but it falls in the same camp as like Vampire Survivors, where it's too dangerously. It seems too dangerously fun and up my alley that I have not given it the time it needs because I'm like I think I would lose a lot of time to it. Maybe now's the perfect time. Um,
But
but
like
no, I
you
haven't.
traveled almost as much, if not more, than me. Like people who listen to this show know that I traveled a lot, especially in the last year and a half.
Yeah,
You traveled as much, if not more. And these both Vampire Survivors and Balatro, the greatest playing games to ever exist.
I used to bring my Switch, my Steam Deck on planes, and probably this year I just stopped bringing either for the most
Wow.
part, unless I had a game to like review or something, because I just found I wasn't doing it. I don't know what it is about planes. Contrary to most people, I'm just not in the mood to play games on them. I often read a lot, or I just stare at the screen in front of me. Like I
Yeah,
don't
the
watch
flight
movies either. I
tracker.
just yeah exactly. Um, yeah, so like playing games isn't just it's just a concept my brain doesn't mesh with for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's just because I'm a little claustrophobic, so I'm already like kind of tight in the seat. And then when you're playing a game, your arms want to be a certain way, and it's just like I don't know. But I know Balatro and Vampire Survivors are on phones, which I do use my phone to like surf the web sometimes, so I don't really have an excuse there.
Is
Um,
Balatro on phones? I've never checked into that. I know
oh, maybe
Vampire
it's not.
Survivors
I know.
was.
Yeah, yeah.
It
Maybe I
seems like it would be
misspoke,
a
but
perfect phone game, Balatro, but I don't
yeah,
think it's on phones. But I've always been the same way, Wes, where it's like anything with depth, like I don't know, it has to be like something extraordinary, like Tears of the
yeah,
Kingdom, where it's like it's something I'm so sucked into, it makes it so like, oh man, I'm so sad I'm away from my console because I can't keep playing this game.
yeah,
It can't be a game that I'm just like passively interested in. It has to be that, or it has to be a game that just has like a quick and immediately like dopamine inducing loop, like Vampire Survivors, like Balatro. Like Vampire Survivors, your maximum run is 30 minutes.
yeah,
Balatro, like, your runs can last like 2 minutes or they can last like 25 minutes. So these are not like long, like it's not a turn-based RPG you're gonna be playing for 60 hours. It's just such a quick loop that it immediately gets you into the action, and that makes it so that I want to play it when I'm on a plane, and then it also makes time go by so fast. Um, yeah, I think like because I used to be the same way. I would load up my Vita and my 3DS and my
yeah.
iPad, and I'd be like, "All right, I am set for this 3.5 hour flight," and then I would just stare out the window and listen to a podcast like a dummy,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
or like
I
stare at
got
the
to the
flight
point
tracker.
where the smaller I could make my backpack and the less cumbersome, the better. So I was like, Steam Deck, you're off the chop, you're on the chopping blocks. Switch eventually. I was bringing books, and then I got a Kindle because the Kindle's even smaller than a book, and like
Hmm.
I had my backpack min maxed for sure. So games lost the fight there.
Yeah, I mean, at least the Switch is like slimline enough. It's not like the
Yeah.
Steam Deck where it takes up like a giant brick in your bag,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
Like the Switch, you can just slide it in. It's like what, 3 or 4 iPads thick.
Yeah, and I stopped using the Switch case too. I would just put the Switch in there. The Steam
Oh,
Deck,
jeez.
however, I needed to have the case because, like, I don't know, it feels a lot more fragile.
I mean, the Switch
Um,
is as fragile as it comes between the Joy-Con drift and the
yeah,
screen. Like, if you don't have a screen protector on your Switch, and like, you might damage that screen sliding it in and out of the dock. Let alone
yeah.
like,
Oh, I do have a screen protector on it, so
oh no.
it survived the flights, but I don't bring it on flights no more. So
Well, Balatro, I'm very excited for this new update, but we don't know when it's coming. It's scheduled for 2025, and like I said, it'll be free for anyone who owns the game. We do have some fun news and then some not so fun news on the Warner Brothers front. I don't know how much you've been tracking this, Wes. First up, let's hit the fun stuff. We know that the second Mortal Kombat movie is coming in October of 2025, at least the second Mortal Kombat movie in the current continuity. And Mortal Kombat series co-creator Ed Boon is just out here leaking stuff. So Ed also likes to have fun online, so he's probably just poking fun at the process. But he said, quote, I recently saw an unfinished cut screening of the Mortal Kombat 2 movie. During the screening, I broke into director Todd Garner's phone. I found this image from the film and sent it to my phone. I can leak stuff too. Thumbs up emoji, hashtag MK2 movie, hashtag Boon leaks. I think he's probably just poking fun at the fact that people always leak stuff related to Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
Like I think all the DLC characters have been leaked over the past like 3 games. But yeah, I mean, it looked really good. It was Katana, Katana holding her fan blades, which looked really, really cool, actually.
Yeah, it does. I just realized I just looked and to see that I thought that was a shot from the game. I guess I didn't read his tweet when I saw it the other day. So that's cool.
No, but like, I mean, the costume design on the first movie, which by the way, did you see the first movie?
No.
I thought it was pretty good. Like a lot of people are like, it's the dumbest thing ever, and like I'm like, well, what did you expect? It's a Mortal
Yeah,
Kombat
I
movie.
just
Like,
want to see people slice each other up.
yeah, and it was you know, really like bloody, and it was like pretty good fight scenes. The only downside was that there wasn't like an actual tournament, which is kind of like, you know, the crux of the Mortal Kombat story.
Yeah.
But you know, you get to see like Sub-Zero and Scorpion and Raiden, and it's like, all right, yeah, this is what I want. Like you, Kano and Sonya Blade are in it. Like, yeah, that's what I want from a Mortal Kombat movie. It's a turn your brain off, just like whatever, enjoy the ride type of movie. And there are some good fight sequences, even though I could probably do without the original character that they added. Cole, I think was his name.
Mm.
But you know, it's still like a fun ride. So this sequel is adding Katana, as the picture showed, Johnny Cage, played by Carl Urban from The Boys. So
I
and
love
also
Carl
several
Urban,
other
but
things.
that seems it's an odd choice. I
It
think
is.
only because he's like a little older than I would picture for a Johnny Cage type character. Maybe that's part of the story is he's like a washed up Johnny Cage, but
Mm-hmm.
interesting choice. Nonetheless, Carl Urban is pretty perfect for that role, assuming the story writes around him being an older Johnny Cage.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to like separate him from his character in The Boys at this point because I love The Boys so much.
Yeah.
But like it's hard for me to like picture Johnny Cage with like that accent and like that kind of like rough and tumble attitude that Billy Butcher has. So I was also like, really, Carl Urban? But like
Yeah.
maybe we'll do like a wait and see here. It would have been kind of perfect if they got Jean-Claude Van Damme to play him, just because that's who he was
Yeah.
supposed to be modeled after in the original Mortal Kombat. But you know, that's who we got also in Mortal Kombat 1, right? Where we got a Jean-Claude Van Damme skin for Johnny
Yeah.
Cage.
Finally.
Yeah, that was fun to see that come full circle. New characters in this one also include Quan Chi and Shao Kahn.
Oh, that's cool. I
Uh,
didn't know that.
yeah, you should check out the first movie. Like, you know, and also the animated films are very good. The
Mm.
what are they called? Mortal Kombat Legends. I think the first one was centered on Scorpion. The second one might have been either Sub-Zero or Johnny Cage. But yeah, they're all fun. Whatever. I know people hate on the last Mortal Kombat movie, but I had a good enough time with it, and you
Yeah.
know it's worth like a $3 or $4 rental on Amazon, or I'm sure it's on Max if you have a Max subscription, because I think
Oh yeah, probably.
that's where it went up, because this was still like during COVID, like when like movie theaters weren't really a thing anymore. So I think they just put it up on Max day one. But yeah,
You know what? I think you're right actually. Yeah, cuz that was like 2021,
Mhm.
2022 when they were still doing that
Yeah,
and
because
making Christopher Nolan mad.
I did, I did the media junket for it and interviewed the guy who plays the original character, the guy who plays Sub-Zero, Kano, and Sonya Blade, which was funny because I think those two actors were paired together, and it's like, you know, they're mortal enemies in the movie, so it was kind of fun to see them playing off each other. But yeah, you can go to Game Informer's YouTube and see those interviews. But
Yeah.
yeah, it
Two quick side notes. Something I've found great joy and happiness in reminiscing on Game Informer is like having memories like that. Like you just mentioned, like, oh, I just talked to. There's a video of me with the cast of Mortal Kombat. It's we have a lot of cool stories. I mean, you've with Miyamoto, like people like that. It's that's something that's really cool that I'll carry with me forever. And also on
absolutely.
the subject of Game Informer and Ed Boon, he put up a really nice post yesterday, kind of like memorializing us and the cover stories we've done for Game Informer with Mortal Kombat. Obviously, Mortal Kombat 11, and then I wasn't sure looking at the older ones, but they're like some of the first Mortal Kombats were on our cover, which is really really cool. I think Mortal Kombat
Yeah.
3 maybe looking at it. But shout out to Ed Boon. He was always really nice to us in person. And obviously, we've done a lot of work with NetherRealm. So shout out to
Yeah.
him.
So the first Mortal Kombat, Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, and Mortal Kombat 11 are the ones that he showed. I don't know if we did any others.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to Ed Boon. He's a real one. Like seriously, like
Yeah.
I used to have a running joke where it's like I had interviewed him like 3 times and I'd met him at like other like parties and industry events, and I always had to reintroduce myself. And like the joke was like, oh, he's just never going to remember who I am. I finally got to that point with him, and it was cool to like finally he'd be like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And yeah, he's always been a really great guy. Like even as I had that joke, but like I get it. Like there are people that I've had to meet like
Oh yeah.
20 times to be like, "Oh yeah, you."
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm awful. I'm like so like face blind and like oh my god! If somebody tells me my name, like I think I tweeted it one time where it was like I've played so many Telltale games that when somebody tells me their name for the first time, in the upper left corner of my periphery, I see Brian will not remember that.
Yeah, I'm usually pretty bad at it too. Especially, I mean, this industry is wide, and there's lots of people, and especially Ed Boon's meeting, I don't know, probably hundreds of people at events and stuff. Can't blame him. But yeah, he was a nice dude. I met him at SGF in 2023 for Mortal Kombat 1, and he was as cool as you think Ed Boon is.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool.
You were in on that interview with me. That was fun.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, it was a good conversation. Yeah, shout out to Ed Boon and the Mortal Kombat team. So, Mortal Kombat 2, I'm excited for it. You should go see the first one, and let's reconvene and talk about your opinions.
Yes, we just need to have like a Wesley reconvene show where I play Vampire Survivors, Balatro, yes. Watch Mortal Kombat. It'll be like reminiscing on all my appearances here.
It would be perfect. Or let's just watch a bunch of gaming movies and then do a gaming movie just marathon review on all things gamers.
I'm down. Sounds great. There's a lot of great ones out there. Most of them are great from what I've heard, right?
Most of them, yes. That's what they're known for, is being great.
Yeah.
So Mortal Kombat 2 hits theaters October 24th, 2025. That leads us to the stressful Warner Brothers news. According to IndieWire, Warner Brothers Discovery says its TV channels are worth $9 billion less than originally valued. And this means that Warner Brothers Discovery had a net loss of $10 billion in the last quarter alone. Which I'm not a masters of business, but like that seems bad.
Yeah,
like
I'm starting to think these executives don't know how to run companies really well sometimes. What's up with that?
Yeah, I mean, not that we have any personal experience with like incompetent CEOs or anything. Like I would never suggest that. But
yeah,
it seems like a lot of these, like, you know, Warner Brothers has been famous recently for like cutting content for the sake of like tax breaks and everything. But yeah, that seems like it's rough. So like, you know, a lot of it is attributable to the TV business. Like they're about to lose the NBA rights, I saw. And, you know, it is reporting that Max, HBO, and Discovery Plus have added 3.6 million subscribers. But that branch of the business still lost $107 million last quarter.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of something we see with games too, where we are taking too long to make things that are too expensive. And then we are having our expectations for profit are their executive expectations for profit are so sky high that it's like almost not possible. And then the impossible does not happen. And the people that suffer are the people in the lower ranks of it, not the executives who make millions. It's going to be TV production crews laid off and stuff, or game developers laid off, not the CEOs and stuff. But yeah, I mean, TV House of Dragon takes like 2 to 3 years. It's extremely expensive. I love it, but it's like I just hate, why do shows take years now? Remember when we used to get like a season a year? I don't know. I'm not surprised by any of this, unfortunately, I guess is what I'm saying.
I would say that you could almost trace it back. I mean, maybe there's an earlier example because this feels very recent, but I guess it hasn't been that recent. But Game of Thrones, I feel like, really pushed TV budgets sky high. Like every Game of Thrones episode felt like a movie, right? Like it was such high production values, and I feel like everybody had to try to keep pace with that. And you know, you go back and you watch something like The Wire, and as great as that show is, like the production values are just a noticeable step down from like what we were getting, what we're getting now, and what we've gotten since like Game of Thrones really like upped the bar.
I mean, Marvel's Secret Invasion, the Scroll series that not a lot of people liked. They spent $250 million on it. That's more than some of their movies cost. Like that's one of the most expensive TV shows ever made, and I think it's like 6 episodes, and I just don't comprehend where that money is going.
That show is
It doesn't make
abysmal.
sense.
That
Yeah,
show
it
is
just
so
doesn't.
bad.
$250 million, $250 million for 6 episodes.
You know,
Make it make
I
sense.
on my flight back from Japan, I opened up my Letterboxd app and I did like a ranking of all the X-Men movies, I did a ranking of all the Spider-Man movies, and I did a ranking of all the MCU. Very bottom entry, Secret Invasion. I
Yeah,
think it was so bad. It almost turned me off from the MCU. Like, and
I think it turned off a lot of people. I mean, really, their shows in general have kind of had that effect.
I mean, a lot of
Um,
them are quite good. Like WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier is very good.
I liked Hawkeye. I know a lot of
Hawkeye was
people
very
did not,
good.
but I liked it. Yeah,
I think a lot of people gave Hawkeye crap because they're like, really, Hawkeye's getting a show, but like, there's so much more to that. Echo
yeah.
was pretty good as well.
I haven't watched Echo yet. I need to. I keep forgetting that one
It's
exists.
I think it's inconsequential, but I think it also serves as a good prequel series for the Daredevil series that we're getting next year,
Yeah,
which I'm very excited for. Daredevil, that's like the OG Marvel TV show. I mean, Agents of Shield, but like Daredevil's where everybody was like, "Oh, this is amazing."
yeah. We might be getting a trailer tomorrow. I think D23 is doing a
Oh,
panel on Daredevil, Armor Wars, and Agatha. So we probably will get a new trailer for Daredevil, and I cannot wait because yeah, like you said, yeah, that Daredevil Netflix show is so good. Season 2, little iffy, but uh, man, it's just so good. It's the
I
OG.
liked
I loved it.
I liked the introduction of the Punisher in season 2. I will say that. I
Yes,
think they
yeah,
did. I mean, John Bernthal's fantastic in that role.
yeah.
Season 3 was a little weird, but I also like the notion of Bullseye and everything in that. But
It ends so strong too. I doubt they're picking up any of those threads, but I kind of hope they do
I mean,
in
they've
some
they've
way.
officially made them canon now. If you
Yeah,
go into Disney Plus, like it used to be its own little category of like the Defenders saga or something like that. Now it's just built into the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline. Like you can go in and be like
yeah,
chronological order, and like Daredevil season 1 is like right after the Avengers. And I'm like, okay, that's cool that like those now exist in the same universe, even though they always were supposed to, but then like they
yeah,
were never picked up. Like, you know, Daredevil should have been in like Infinity War or something, but whatever.
yeah.
So how does all this Warner Brothers news affect gaming? Well, the Financial Times is reporting that WB is exploring options for selling its gaming division, and developers under Warner Brothers include NetherRealm, Mortal Kombat, Rocksteady, who did, we'll just say, the Batman Arkham games, Avalanche, which did Hogwarts Legacy, Monolith Productions, which works on like the Middle Earth, Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor games,
And
and
Wonder Woman.
yeah, and Wonder Woman, the upcoming Wonder Woman. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And TT Games, which works on a lot of Lego titles. But Wes, you like I said, you were the news hound at Game Informer, and I feel like we've been hearing about a potential sale of WB Games or like various WB properties in the gaming division for a long time now. Do you think this is when it finally happens?
I think so. I just wonder who's going to be interested in buying it. I think acquisitions have slowed down a lot because they're expensive and they aren't turning out to do as well as I think people, as these studios might have hoped. And I imagine Warner Bros. Is going to have a huge asking price for this. I mean, it's kind of like a wild statement that they're even considering selling some of these companies. Like Hogwarts Legacy was the best selling game of 2023. It was the first non Call of Duty game since like 2018 to be the number one selling game of the year, which is like a huge, huge deal. I think 23 million copies. Um, but then they put out Suicide Squad, which I think had like a $200 million loss, which reportedly like pretty much offset all of Hogwarts Legacy's financial goodwill. But it still seems kind of wild to consider selling at least Avalanche because Hogwarts Legacy 2, surely in development or at least in pre-production, is going to sell as much, if not more. And if you gave these studios Rocksteady, if you told the world Rocksteady was making a single player superhero game based on a DC property, they're in the green again. Like people are going to be excited for it. We all kind of understand why Suicide Squad happened, and we all kind of just want Rocksteady to go back to their roots. But I don't know. Yeah, money speaks. These executives, they work in quarterlies, and if selling these companies now results in a profitable quarter, then they'll do it, not thinking about the quarter that comes after or the one that comes after that. Seems silly to me, but that's how the finances work in that world, I guess. Whoever gets these studios, I don't know if they're going to sell them off one by one or as like a Warner Bros. Acquisition sale, but there's a lot up for the ripe for the picking that I think anybody would be lucky to have. I'm a little worried that uh, Embracer's not buying much, but man, imagine if like Embracer got a hold of some of these. Like, there's so much history and legacy in these games that now that we've all kind of gotten on the other side of acquisitions, where we're all kind of like, please stop doing this. It's not turning out well. We're losing studios. It's scary. Yeah, I'm a little scared of what happens to Rocksteady, of what happens to Avalanche, of TT, like the Lego games. Like, there's so many storied developers involved in this, and I hope they end up at good homes. But history says they might not.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nintendo should just buy Monolith and then have both Monolith productions under their umbrella, because the one that makes
Yes.
Xenoblade is also called Monolith. And then
Imagine a Xenoblade game with, or not even a Xenoblade, but a Monolith game with Monolith's Nemesis system on Switch too.
With Mario characters. Like,
Yes, we just made the perfect game.
a Koopa Troopa kills Mario, gets in your face and taunts you, and then it's like next to you encounter it's a Paratroopa.
Yeah,
And
that actually would be kind of sick. That would be cool.
I don't think that's ever going to happen. But
No,
then
I don't
again,
think so.
Ubisoft made a game where Mario has a gun. So, I mean,
Yeah,
you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a gun-wielding Mario.
that's what they say.
That's what they say. That's Harvey Dent's famous quote. A reminder that you can support the All Things Nintendo podcast through a variety of ways. The biggest and best way is the aforementioned Patreon page, but there's other ways as well. You can also check out the official All Things Nintendo merchandise store on TeePublic, or subscribe to my YouTube channel, currently pushing to hit 500 subscribers there. Wes, before we break, what do you have going on now that you have a little extra time on your hands?
Well, currently I'm on the job hunt. Life goes on and I have bills to pay. So I'm looking for any job in editorial. Ideally, I'd love to continue writing. I think I'm a great writer and I love doing it. PR, comms, community management, marketing, like really anything. I'd love to stay in games, but I'm also, I'm aware of the games market and how before the Game Informer crew joined the hundreds of people also looking for jobs, how tough of a market it is out there. So I'm really just looking for anything full time. So if anybody's listening and has a leads, hit me up on Twitter at LeBlanc West. That's been my main line of communication. If you have freelance opportunities, I'm down for those as well. And otherwise, I'm just trying to take it easy and keep looking on the bright side. And I've been really enjoying like seeing people reminiscing on Game Informer and all the memories. It's been great. It's cool to be a part of that legacy and to see that, despite it being gone online and not knowing what's going to happen to its like storied archive and YouTube and the vault and all that stuff, it's cool knowing there's like hundreds, if not thousands or millions of people out there who have their own individual memories, their own pictures, their own favorite articles that they're all sharing now. And it's really cool to see. So yeah, I'm just going to focus on the positive while looking for a new way to pay bills.
For sure. And I mean, if anybody listening to this happens to have a job that Wes would be a good fit for, I mean, reach out to me and I will give you a glowing recommendation. It was an absolute joy to work alongside this man, and even cooler getting to hang out with him. So I posted this on my Twitter when like I retweeted your thing where I was like, you have like this tenacity about you with like how you approach work, but at the same time you're like one of the chillest dudes I've ever like worked with. So it's like this weird balance of like you so aggressively go after your work, but like interfacing with you and talking with you, like this is exactly how you are, like how you are on the show, where you're just like kind of chill and like relaxed and everything, but like your work is the exact opposite of that, where you're just like so locked in and so like intense about getting the work done and everything. But like if I like send you a message while you're working, it's not like you snap my head off or anything. You're just like, oh yeah, hey man, how's it going? Like it's just like still like such a it's good vibes all around. And I think that that's like
thank you
a really good way, because I have worked with people at other jobs, like past jobs, where it's like they have that tenacity, but also like if you talk to them like while they're working, they will like give you like they'll stare daggers through you basically, and like
no
daggers. How dare you interrupt me? But no, like you have the perfect balance of like being great at your job, being intense about your job, being passionate about your job, but also being a cool dude. And like, that's
Thank
a
you. I
really good
appreciate it.
quality to have. But yeah, anybody has any opportunities that you'd like to ask me about for Wes, I give him my wholehearted recommendation. And also you can email me, brian@allthingsnintendo.com, and I'll give you descriptive details about how good at his job he is. But is there
I'm
anything
fun in
else?
Japan too, which we'll
And
talk
fun in
about
Japan, which
soon.
we're going to talk about after this. But before we do that, is there anything you'd like to plug before we head to the main segment?
No, not right now. I think I'm just kind of I had a podcast in the past called Dragon Ball Speak where me and my best friend rewatch Dragon Ball episodes and review them. We've been struggling to get that back going just because he had twin kids and our job got more and more busy as we lost staff count. But yeah, we're looking into bringing that back. So if you've ever heard me talk about that before, potentially be on the lookout for that. But right now, nothing really to plug. Just except myself, just my LinkedIn profile. That's the new plug. Check me out on LinkedIn.
Well, we are going to take our first break of this episode, and when we get back, Wes and I are going to be doing a little bit of story time from our time in Japan. We will be right back. We are back, and I wanted to spend this main segment talking about our recent trip to Japan. But first, I do want to give some very brief impressions of a game I actually checked out last night that is a new release on Switch. That game is Volgarr the Viking 2. And, I tried playing the original one when it came out. I think it was like more than 10 years ago. It might have been like 12 years ago. I don't know. Like, I need to figure out when that was. I don't want to just spout off nonsense there. But Volgarr the Viking 1. Let's see. I'm sure it came to Switch more recently than that, but let's see. So Volgarr the Viking came out in 2013, so 11 years ago that game came out. And I remember playing it and being like, wow, this is extremely hard. I'm going to stick with it for a little bit. And I stuck with it for a little bit, and I was like, wow, this is still extremely hard to the point that I don't want to play this game. And I know that a lot of people love that game. Volgarr the Viking 2, I was like, you know what? My tastes have matured. It's been 11 years since that first game came out. I'm going to try this game. It's like an homage to like 80s platform action games, like arcade style ones. And, it still has that same difficulty that those games have. Man, did I really like the gameplay, but really not like the difficulty. So you start off and you're just this like muscle bound guy with a sword, and you're wearing like no clothes basically. And as you go around the level, if you find like secret areas, you can go up and get an armor piece, and that adds like a hit point. And so I find like, oh, I got like armored boots now, and if you get hit, those fall off, and then like you're down to the last hit point. It is punishingly difficult in a way that like I played it for a couple hours last night, and then I was like, I don't think this is how I want to spend my gaming time right now. Like, and I've been playing Elden Ring, so it's like that like I'm not averse to punishingly difficult games, but like I'm going through and I'm like, and it just has you replay the same section over and over again. It's like each time I get a little bit further, which there is an appeal to that, but you're getting new power ups. You're getting you can. Like, you have a sword, you can throw a spear. I like that you can throw a spear into a wall and it becomes a platform. So like you can reach a little bit higher, and like there's a puzzle solving component to that where it's like, okay, well, how do I reach that that area up there? And it's like, oh, well, there's a wall somewhat close to it that I could throw a spear and then use that to jump off that and then get to the rope, get the armor. And there's the graphics are extremely appealing. I love that. The gameplay feels nice and tight. It's just that like I got so sick of replaying the same area over and over again. This is not a review of this game. This is just my early impressions. I don't know if I'm going to spend too much more time with this game unless like I turn a corner on it and am like, hey, this is like, it's finally clicking with me. But right now it feels like almost like a roguelite or roguelike without any sense of progression, where it's like, okay, I keep dying, and then you start back over at the start of that area, And it's like, all right, all I have is like the stuff that I learned. I don't have any
Yeah.
like stat progression or anything like that that you would get from a roguelike, which that's the only thing that keeps me coming back to roguelikes. I don't, again, don't mind the difficulty unless it's like it's not rewarding difficulty to me. And that's how this kind of feels. And I've seen people praise this game, and I'm sure that if I push through this wall, it will be fantastic. Because like I reviewed Blasphemous 2, which is another like super punishing, super difficult like action platforming Metroidvania. I don't think this is Metroidvania. I think this is just more like straightforward linear progress or linear action platforming. But I have enjoyed extremely difficult action platforming 2D games, and I don't know, this is going to be a tough sell for me. I'm not done with it yet. I'm not done trying it and like ramming my head against this wall yet, but I was kind of disenchanted with it when I was when I was done playing for a couple of hours last night. It just frustrating that like I was dying so easily from like these little like wimpy looking enemies, and it's like I'm like this muscle bound Viking. I should be like at least be able to take a hit from like this withering away zombie that's just like kind of walking towards me. But I don't know. It's out now on Switch if you are liking kind of like the punishing side of things. But it might not be for me, unfortunately. But yeah, the visuals, they're very like, pixel art based. They look fantastic. I really enjoy a lot about like the gameplay that I'm seeing so far. It almost feels tuned in an unfair manner. But maybe it's just I haven't gotten the hang of the loop yet. Maybe I haven't gotten the hang of like the gameplay yet. But right now my early impressions are like this might not be a game built for Brian.
Dang, that sucks. But I get it. I mean, especially right now, we kind of talked about it earlier, but we're both like very sensitive to a game working or not working. So I can see how ultra punishing, no progression in stats isn't really meshing right now. But yeah, it looks cool. I'm not familiar with the franchise beyond what I've seen this week, but I've seen mixed reviews, and then some people love it, some people hate it. Yeah, it looks good at least.
Yeah, it does look very good. And again, it feels good in action. I just maybe once I push through this like initial of like, all right, where is like the reward in this aside from just getting through to the next area?
Mm-hmm.
Once I get pushed through that, maybe there will be more to it. I'm fully acknowledging that I'm extremely early in the gameplay. But those are my initial thoughts on Volgarr the Viking 2. It is out now on Switch and I believe several other platforms. Wes, let's talk about our trip to Japan. So
Yeah.
this was a fun time. But as somebody pointed out to me, it also might be the most cursed trip of all time.
Yes.
So we went there for a story that was going to be in an upcoming issue of Game Informer. I woke up on my day that I was flying there to the news of the CrowdStrike crash, which meant that the airport was an absolute madhouse. Thankfully, I was only affected insofar as I had a 30-minute delay. So I was worried I was not going to be getting to Japan that day. But
Yeah.
30-minute delay at the airport. And then we got off the ground and it was a fairly smooth flight all the way to Japan. You were not so lucky. You were going to fly out a couple days later. So I assumed things would be fixed by then. Your flight was canceled, correct?
Yes. Yeah. But before that, even uh, another person, I won't say names just in case they like, I don't know, want names out, but like another person was supposed to fly with you. And because of like a health reason, medical reason, they were not able to. So it was basically like hey, does anyone want to fly to Japan tomorrow type situation? And I was available to even take this trip potentially. I couldn't do tomorrow because I had weekend plans. So I was like, sure, I'll fly out Sunday because I think you flew out on a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I wake up at very early Sunday morning, like 4:30, and check my phone. My flight has been delayed by like an hour or two, so I'm like, okay, I'll sleep an hour or two longer. Get up, I'm on the way to the airport. Halfway there, I get a notification that my flight has been canceled. And it was a Delta flight, so I'm not wasn't necessarily surprised. I'm already halfway to the airport, so I go stand in line for like an hour to talk to them, and they're basically just like, I mean, if you've read anything about Delta during this whole CrowdStrike thing, they didn't have anything really. It was just very much like, sorry, but don't know what to do. And I'm like, is there any other flight you can get me on? Is there any way to make this happen? And they're just like, we don't know. I don't think so. Went home, and I eventually finally flew out the next day, Monday, which means instead of having like 4 days in Japan, I was going to have 3 days in Japan.
Which is not even enough time to acclimate.
Yeah, it's rough. But I made it, and Japan is worth it. I love Japan so much, especially Tokyo, which is where we were. That like even 2 to 3 days of jet lagged exhaustion in Japan is awesome and worth it.
This trip was so chaotic and so much stuff happened to the trip. I completely forgot it was not supposed to be you on the trip. Like in thinking about like all the chaos, because my morning was the CrowdStrike thing. Thankfully, my Delta flight to Japan was on time, aside from the 30-minute delay, but on time relatively. We got there, I think, at the time we were supposed to.
Crazy. I know. That's awesome.
I think it was because what I had heard, and this is not like any kind of official messaging, but they were prioritizing international flights. So they were getting those flights out. Whereas you weren't flying directly to Japan like I was. You were flying to a connection within the US. So I think that's probably why yours was canceled and mine was not.
Yeah, I think so.
So, I get there and I have a couple of days where it's just me in Japan. So I was doing all kinds of exploration. I went to Akihabara, which is the like kind of gaming mecca in Japan. All kinds of used game stores, several arcades. It's a really great time. And just kind of wandering around, like just having a good time. The thing that I was unaware of, because I've only gone to Japan in the fall, is this time of year, in particular, we were there late July, the most humid time in the world. Like it was just like you step outside and you walk across the street and you're drenched in sweat. Add to that the fact that it was also anywhere between 90 to 95 degrees during the day. And it's just unpleasant to be outside. But it's like, what am I going to do? Sit in my hotel room all day? Like while like Tokyo is outside my window? I was like, no, that's not going to happen. So I always pack when I go on these trips several days extra worth of clothes and underwear and socks. By the end of this trip, I was getting down to it. I was like, man, I have a couple shirts and like a couple pairs of underwear that I have not like sweated through. So I'm glad that I overpack on a lot of these trips. But let's talk about some of the stuff that we did. You finally got there a day later than anticipated. And, we did a little bit of sightseeing together. Yeah. And one of the things that we did, because we're both Persona nerds.
Hold on, to set the oh wait, are we talking about Thursday or are you talking about a day before that?
I'm just talking like stream of consciousness here. But
just to add to the chaos, I had a free day on Thursday after the work part of the stuff. Brian was supposed to fly out that day. We're in the lobby, we're saying goodbye, and then like not 20 minutes later, I'm about to like go embark on my day out, free day in Tokyo. He's like, hey, my flight got canceled till tomorrow. I'm gonna come hang. And so now me and Brian got to have like a whole free day in Tokyo hanging out together, which we didn't know at the time would basically be our last Game Informer hangout together. And it was awesome. But just wanted to add more chaos to the mix.
Yeah, more chaos to it was, I was supposed to fly back Thursday and then you were going to fly back Friday, and it's just like, oh yeah, your flight is now canceled and there are no other flights to Minneapolis on this day. So we rebooked you for tomorrow. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I mean, at first I was like, this is the most stressful thing ever. And then I was like thinking about it. I'm like, well, I get an extra day in Japan. That's not the worst thing in the world.
Another day for curry, they say.
You had already plotted out this amazing day that you were going to have of like exploring Tokyo. And I was like, I wouldn't mind doing all that stuff too. So we did a lot of stuff then. But we're both Persona fans. And, Persona 5, probably my second favorite RPG of all time. I don't know where it ranks for you.
It's probably my top 3 favorite games ever. Persona 5
so
Royal Eye. It's home. It's a very homey game for me.
So we did a little bit of a Persona sightseeing tour in like various areas that are present in that game. So we went to Shungenjaya, which has some areas that have inspired Yongenjaya, which is kind of like a fictional area where like Cafe Leblanc is. So we went and saw like the exterior that inspired Cafe Leblanc.
It's so
We
similar. It's very funny. I'm playing Persona 5 Strikers right now, and you're back at Cafe LeBlanc and stuff, and I'm like, oh, it's pretty identical to that. It's the
yeah.
same colors, the same little awning and everything. It's very cool. Very cool to see in person.
And then we went to Shibuya, did the crossing, and saw like we took a train from the train station that is Persona is like, that's where you go to do that. There's also the area outside of the train station where the politician gives his speech.
Yeah,
There's the dog statue. I forget what the dog's name is,
I forget too.
but yeah, we just
Central
we
Street, which is across, you go through Shibuya Crossing into Central Street basically, and that's where like all the little convenience stores and stuff in the game are at, and yeah,
yeah, there's the Phantom Thieves hideout and everything. So yeah, it was very cool to see all that stuff. I've done most of that stuff anyway before, aside from Cafe LeBlanc. Um, we also, when we were in Shibuya, we hit up Parco, which is basically this tower mall. It's like a shopping
yeah.
mall. It's like in like a one of the skyscrapers in Shibuya. And if you go up to one of the floors, it's just like a gaming themed floor where at the center is the Nintendo Tokyo store, and then around it are the Pokemon store and Capcom store. So we hit up those.
There's a
I
Shonen Jump store as well,
There's
which
a
is cool
Shonen
if you
Jump
like
store, yeah.
anime. There's the esports cafe.
Yeah.
It's very nerd central in Shibuya.
So we got a lot of really fun stuff there. We checked out the Pokemon store has a lot of really cool stuff. The Nintendo store is the centerpiece though, and
Yeah,
rightfully so. Like that store is amazing. So much cool stuff. I spent too much money on it. Bought a bunch of souvenirs for people. Our Game Informer's former production director, Margaret, is a giant Animal Crossing fan, so I got her like an Animal Crossing towel. And I think in the past I've gotten her like an Animal Crossing coffee mug. Just got a bunch of people. Like I have a friend who's a big Kirby fan. I got her some Kirby like gummy snacks. Yeah, like just like a bunch of cool things that were there. I got a Zelda notebook for myself. I wish I would have gotten the kind of the premium one now that you
yeah.
know, I don't know when I'm going to go back to Tokyo. But yeah, Pokemon store. I didn't really get much there because I had gone to the Pokemon Center at the Sky Tree, which is one of the things that we did, which is the tallest like standalone tower on the planet. You and I went up in that, and then there's a
It's
Pokemon Center in the first floor of that, or like the fourth floor of that.
and there's every Pokemon Center has like a standout, like a marquee statue when you walk
Mm-hmm.
in. Like the one in Shibuya next to the Nintendo store is Mewtwo and like his little glass case. There's one
So
with like a
cool.
giant Snorlax. This one is very cool because it's in the Sky Tree, and it's Rayquaza at the front. Which, if you've played Emerald, you know Rayquaza's in like the Sky Tower, and it's very cool. And there's also a Mega Rayquaza elsewhere in the store, kind of breaking through the ceiling. So very fitting that the Sky Tree store has that
It
Pokemon Center.
it's amazing how many Pokemon stores there are around. I wish there were some of them in the U.S. I feel like they would do very well.
They would. It's weird that we don't have them, especially because the Nintendo store in New York is always so busy. And the Nintendo store in New York, I love going there. It is so nothing compared to the Nintendo stores in Japan. Like probably 10% of the offering there. So like if you've been to the New York store and you're like, I don't know why people make such a big deal of it, the Japan ones are on a whole different level.
Yeah, and there's also a Nintendo store opening in San Francisco, I think next year in spring, if
Oh,
I'm not
okay, nice.
mistaken. So they are like starting to expand a little bit, but yeah, Pokemon centers would do so well. Like even if they were just in a few different cities, like even if they just mirrored like wherever like Nintendo worlds are going to be, like the
Yeah.
Super Nintendo worlds, put one in like LA, put one in Orlando, and yeah, I mean probably one in New York would make sense as well. Or even, I mean, is there one in Seattle where Pokemon Company is
No, I don't
based? I
think
don't think
so.
so.
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
there's
I've.
any in the States. I think there's one in the UK and there's one and then the rest are in Japan.
That's wild to me. They're so
Yeah.
cool too with the statues and everything. Like if you go to Nintendo New York, there's the Mario sliding down the flagpole. There's a Bowser like kind of breaking through the wall, and there's like a Link statue. I think they have the Tears of the Kingdom Link statue now. It used to just be like
Like Ocarina Link, I
I don't know if
think.
it was Ocarina Link. I think it was uh, Twilight Princess Link. God, why couldn't I pull that
Yeah, yeah,
name?
you're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I think there's a Pikachu, but like
Yes.
nothing like super cool. They're just kind of posing, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like the Rayquaza one where it was like breaking through the ceiling, or the Mewtwo in his giant like glass vial. Um, yeah, those were super cool. The Capcom store has a giant Ryu statue.
Yeah.
It's a smaller store, you know, like there's only a few different items and everything. There was
You could buy Resident Evil herbs and like vials
yeah,
and mixtures and stuff. It's really cool.
they had some cool Street Fighter T-shirts. I wish I would have bought one in hindsight.
Yeah. I know we both talked about the whole time we were there. We talked about how it's easy to spend a lot, and we were both like, this trip specifically, like we're not going crazy spending a lot. And now I'm like, I wish I just would have bought everything I saw that I wanted and figured out how to pay for it later.
Yeah, did you? I forget if you were with me. Did we go into any of the arcades in Shibuya
Mm-mm.
or I'm sorry, Akihabara?
Now I've been in them before, and they are the loudest, stressful, cool places ever. But yeah, I've played Street Fighter 2 a few times, a DDR. Yeah, they're cool, but we didn't go on this specific trip. We spent a lot of time in game stores in Akihabara.
Yeah, I went in one by myself then because I went to Akihabara by myself, and then when my flight was canceled, I was like, I'll just tag along with Wes on whatever he has planned. And part of that was Akihabara, and I'm like, well, you don't have to twist my arm to go back.
Yeah,
So I went to an arcade, just kind of walked through it. You know, it's also a good place that like if you need to use the restroom because you know when you're out all day and like I'm trying to stay hydrated, that is something that happens. So I would just walk into the store or the arcade and you know walk around a little bit, and they would have like a public restroom because they don't want people to have to leave the store the arcade if they have to use the bathroom. So, you know, there's little pro tips that you pick up on along the way. Like, you know, there's no trash cans in Japan in public. So the pro tip is always like, oh, we'll go into a convenience store if there's something you really need to dispose of. Like if I got
yeah,
like food to go and I don't want to carry around this like crumbled up bag for the rest of my day, you can do that. Like you'll buy something in a Kobini and then you have another bottle that you have to carry around. But thankfully, like the bottles are easier to dispose of because most of the vending machines will have little things you can deposit the plastic
yeah,
bottles. Um, but yeah, so arcade, I didn't really play much. I was gonna play Street Fighter 2, but like the day that I went, it was a Saturday, so of course it was gonna be pretty busy. They were all full, so I watched a couple
yeah.
people play Street Fighter. They're so good. They're on another level in Japan when it comes to
They
like
really
playing.
are.
So I
And it's
also
those old classic machines too. It's so cool.
they're amazing. And they did have the Street Fighter 6 cabinet up and running, and you know, they have it set up so you can use either the deck, this like the stick, or they have a controller plugged into it, which is very cool
Oh,
as
really?
well.
That's cool. Yeah,
So yeah, I didn't play anything really in there, but I do love just being in those spaces. It's so cool to like see like what games are popular, what games aren't. Metal Slug, surprisingly popular over in
oh, okay.
Japan, like in the arcades. Like every time I saw a Metal Slug cabinet, I went into like 3 arcades. There's always somebody sitting at the Metal Slug cabinet, like playing against a boss, and it was amazing.
That's awesome.
Um, I did a little bit of Pokemon card shopping. I didn't really buy a whole lot. I never really buy a whole lot in terms of like Pokemon cards when I'm over in Japan, but I do like looking at them and seeing like, oh,
Yeah.
is there like a cool one that I can find? The one I found this time was one that I used to have as a kid. It was the Ancient Mew that you got from going
Yeah.
to see the Pokemon movie. And I used to have it when I was a kid, and I think I just sold it when I sold all of my Pokemon cards when I was younger. And I was like, I always liked having this card, and it was like 1,500 yen, which is like $10. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'll buy that one. That's a really good one to have. I don't know, like it's probably not worth anything, but whatever. It's fun to add to my collection. The thing that we did do though was we went retro game shopping. And I remember it was the last night that I was in Tokyo, or last scheduled night that I was in Tokyo. And I'd lamented to you, there were 2 things that I always do when I come to Tokyo and I didn't get to do at that point. And it was, one of them was go to Golden Guy and have a couple drinks. And the other one was pick up a retro game in Japan. And you know, there were a couple that I was targeting that I wasn't able to find. I was like looking for like A Link to the Past. I was looking for Persona 5 until I realized that Persona 5's box art is essentially the same in Japan as it is in the US. And I was like, it's not so special.
Yeah.
So I set my sights on like a wider net. I was like, well, what about Sonic and Knuckles? What about like Turtles in Time? Turns out those are super expensive in Japan. So I was like, never mind. I'm not going to spend like $450 on Sonic and Knuckles.
Oof. Yeah.
So I set my sights on some older Sonic games that are not Sonic and Knuckles, and I found a pretty cheap copy of Sonic 1 complete in box, and I was pretty happy with that. I think I spent like, 13 bucks on it. And I was like, you know what? That is a solid collection. The Sonic 1 through 3 box art is so cool. It's very like
Very
90s
90s.
pop
Yeah.
art style.
It's like a Chuck E. Cheese box art or something.
It does. It doesn't look anything like the ones that we had in the US. So I was like, all right, that's a good addition to my collection. Sonic 1, and maybe if I go back, I'll get Sonic 2 next time. But yeah, did you get any retro games while we were out?
Not this time, no. Usually I'm looking for a Final Fantasy 13 copy if I go to a country where they have like a different language, and I've already got, I think I have two from Japan already with different box arts, and then Pokemon games. But as I'm sure you know, Pokemon games are hot commodities in Akihabara, and they are just so expensive. So it's always a struggle. I look at the game, I pick it up, and I'm like, do I want to spend $150 to $200 on something that ultimately will just stay in a box on a shelf? And I talk myself out of it, which is great this time, especially now that I a week and a half later don't have an income.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I've come home with Final Fantasy 13, and I have a not in box, but just a Pokemon Crystal cartridge up on my shelf that I really like because Crystal is one of my favorites. I've always wanted to come home with Emerald, but Emerald is not often out of its box, which is usually cheaper. Like, a Crystal out of its box cost me $40. And Emerald in its box is like $250 there. And I just can't bring myself to spend it. So I haven't come home with it. And now I don't know if I ever will. But yeah, I still love just looking at old games. It's fun to see games you've forgotten about, see how much a game you used to own is worth, and kicking yourself over getting rid of it. And as a gamer, it's a place you got to go to one day in your life if you can. It's just the coolest place. If you like anime, if you like nerdy stuff, like it is heaven. It's awesome.
It's very, very cool. I'm glad I got to go back with you because like it's a fun thing to experience with a friend as well.
Yes, yeah, it's cool. It's yeah, it's the best.
I also went to a taiyaki place, so it's like pancakes almost, and then like you can get different fillings and like they make like a little sandwich out of it. And I happened to notice they had a Pokemon collab going on, so I got a Magikarp
Oh,
taiyaki.
yeah,
You can go on my TikTok or my Instagram and see like the actual Magikarp. It was actually pretty cool looking. It didn't look like garbage. It looked very good. The chocolate spread, it was almost like a straight chocolate Nutella instead of like it didn't have hazelnut flavor in it. That tasted delicious. The pancakes
yeah.
were rather flavorless, if I'm being honest, but it's just so cool how gaming has infiltrated so much of the culture over there. It's
It's
not
the
just
it,
like oh, this is a gaming thing that like they're doing with this mainstream brand to cater to that specific demographic. It was like, no, this is like just part of the culture is
it,
gaming
it
and anime.
truly, especially like Pokemon, and well, actually probably Pokemon more than even Nintendo. Like vending machines have Pikachu's all over it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's the gachapons. It's
There's Kirby cafes just like at the base of the
yeah.
Tokyo Sky Tree.
There's Pokemon Cafe, Final Fantasy Cafe, Square Enix Cafe. Like there's so much nerdy stuff like that in Japan. It's not that America is ashamed of gaming or anything, but like it's so different there, where gaming is just part of the culture. Um, I don't know. Like here, when I talk about gaming, sometimes people are like, "Oh, like video games, like what do you mean, blah blah blah." In Japan, it's like it's a very highly regarded
When
piece
you
of entertainment.
when you get off the plane, like I think in Tokyo Haneda, which is like the one that's closer to it is downtown essentially.
Yeah.
It's like Hello Kitty is like saying welcome to Japan. And then like in Narita, at least when I flew in there in 2019, there's a big like Nintendo display with like Mario and Peach and Bowser and like it
Yes.
says welcome to Japan. And it's like this is the coolest thing ever. I remember being blown away by that the first time I went to Tokyo because I flew into Narita, and it's like what? This would never be unless maybe Seattle because that's where Nintendo of America is, but like
Probably even not though. I bet not.
it's just like so crazy that like all right, this is just like all right, there's Pokemon stuff just integrated into like various like mainstream culture things. So
Yeah.
that
And
was
like you mentioned,
wild.
like the Taiyaki, I mean, you just stumbled upon that, and they just have a Magikarp Taiyaki. That there's so much out there like that. Like you could just go to a random restaurant and the curry is like a Charizard curry because it's spicy, or
Yeah.
it's so cool how it's all integrated there and
Or like,
random.
yeah, they just had like a Pokemon cafe in the Skytree, and it was like you can get like different themed drinks after like the new characters in the new run of the anime.
Yeah.
And it's like this is so cool. And like you would even like I want to get one, but like I don't really have any familiarity with these characters, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend the money on this.
Marketing
Um,
works.
so my flight was canceled, as I mentioned. Delta actually did right by me. They upgraded me to Delta One, which gave me access to the Delta Club Lounge. It's a good thing that they did because my flight was delayed by 4 hours once I was there. So I hung out with you for a little bit. We got some curry. We got some coffee. I sent you on your way because you had a different flight, and then I went up into the Sky Club Lounge and was like, "All right, I'm going to do some work on some stuff that I was working on for Game Informer." And I walk into the Sky Club Lounge, and who is sitting in the Tokyo Sky Club Lounge but President of Nintendo of America, Doug Bowser? And
Crazy.
I was like, what are the odds of that? And like,
Yeah.
I didn't go up and bother him because I've only met him once before. It was at the Mario movie premiere, and he's a very friendly guy. I had a good conversation with him. I exchanged pleasantries. I feel like we both recognized each other, and I was just like, I don't want to bother him.
Yeah.
He nobody wants to be bothered at the airport. So I walked past him and like just to verify it was him, and yes, it was. And it was just kind of a cool, weird coincidence that was like an end cap of like this very odd trip. And,
Yeah.
with all the travel cancellations, somebody having to drop out of the trip because of an illness, and, my flight canceled, your flight canceled.
And
The end cap.
we can't even talk about like why we were there. And I hope you get to one. I hope we get to one day, because like the why we were there, and it's just it's a top tier memory I have for Game Informer. So I hope that like we get to talk about it one day because it's so cool. So like on top of how weird and chaotic the trip was, it was also probably one of my all time favorite trips with GI. Like it's up there for sure. And that it's like almost one of my last trips ever is weirdly bittersweet.
Yeah, we lined up some really cool stuff there. So hopefully that stuff eventually does see the light of day.
Yeah.
But then to add to like all the chaos, the thing that we were going to work on this stuff for is just never going to come out because now we're all gone. Now Game Informer no longer
Yeah.
exists, and it's just a wild turn of events that like it was like we defied the odds by getting to Japan with the CrowdStrike stuff, with one of our team members falling out because of health related issues, with your flight being canceled, and then with my flight back getting canceled. And then it's like we defied the gods and like actually got this trip done. I remember talking to somebody else who was on the trip with us from another team and being like, in spite of all this, we still pulled it off. And then GameStop said, no, the F you did not.
Hold my beer.
So, Wes, anything else you want to mention before we wrap up this main segment and then move on to the quick final segment?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it just really was, it was an amazing trip, and it's really cool, like looking back now after everything that's happened, that we got to hang out one last time. Obviously, we're coworkers and stuff, but like friends first, I think is the important part about you and everybody at Game Informer. Like we were all really, family is like a weird word to use with businesses, but like, I don't care. I mean, it did feel like a family. We were a scrappy group doing our best to make something incredible happen. And it's cool just looking back that like one of my final Game Informer official hangs was like you and me just having a blast in Japan on a completely free day, doing whatever we wanted. It's awesome. Yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah. And, I agree that term gets thrown around a lot by like startups as
Yeah.
like, hey, we're all family here, as like kind of a manipulative way to like get you to like work beyond your job description. But it did feel like a family, like an actual like family at Game Informer, where like we all loved each other, we all cared for each other. And in that sense, I think that was the spirit in which Matt, Kyle, and I tried to lead the team of like,
Yeah.
hey, if you have something you need to do, go do it. Don't worry about like this. Like, yeah, we all need to get our work done, but like we tried not to like overburden people, and we tried to like be understanding if somebody had like if somebody got sick, or if somebody had like a family thing they had to do, or even they just had plans. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you have therapy. Like people would just be open about it. And I love that we had that environment of like, hey, I have therapy today. So I'm going to be unavailable from this time. We're like, hey, man, I hope it goes well. It was
Yeah.
never like, oh, that's really inconvenient for us. It was like, we tried to, have each other's back in a way that I don't think other jobs will. And
No, it's something that is especially sucks with all that. I mean, there's so much that sucks with all this, but it's like looking ahead to what's next is I'm like, I just don't know if it's going to be better than
mhm,
Game Informer. Like, I mean, you were my direct supervisor, which means like technically my boss, but like you were never bossy or like you were always I said this on your tweet when you were looking for work, but like you always put us first before the work. And like any good leader knows that like that is how you get good work is you put the people's health, their mental health, their physical health, their appreciation, their care. Like you poured a lot into us as humans and people instead of just workers and employees. And the result was like, I think, incredible work at GI. So yeah, any place would be lucky to have you or Kyle or Matt. You guys really were such a strong like leading force that made us all comfortable in working. And then also if we had too much, I never was scared to be like, hey Brian, I have just too much on my plate. I can't do this. It was always like totally understand. And I think that's how I was able to be so tenacious, as you put it, while remaining chills, because like as hard as my plate would be, if I loaded myself up with work, I could always just be like, I need to take a chill break and relax from this. And yeah, it was just, it's the coolest workplace, not to mention like we just had in this conversation, like we also got to go to Japan sometimes or SGF or other cover story trips and doing all this. There's so much cool stuff we did. I'm like, I don't know if a workplace is going to be better than Game Informer. I don't know if I'm of a team better than you and everybody else at Game Informer. It was just the best, truly the best.
yeah, it was fantastic. And thank you for your kind words. Yeah, it was just a wonderful experience, even in spite of all the difficulties that were outside of our control as a Game
Yeah.
Informer unit.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like it was a great team, a great environment. It sucks the most because I feel like we were really finally hitting our stride, like the past like year and a half or so, where it was like we were past the point of like, oh man, our team is so small, like we're just like flying by the seat of our pants. We still were, and we were still like over busy because our
Yeah.
team was so small, not by our own doing. And it felt like we'd finally figured it out. We were firing on all cylinders, and like we had the perfect workflow, and we figured it out. And even then, like we were the ones kind of thrown under the bus, which is really unfortunate because I feel like we were among the most successful of branches of that company. So
Yeah.
uh, Wes, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I have an eShop gem for everybody. We will be right back. We are back, and before we wrap up this episode of All Things Nintendo, I wanted to give an eShop gem of the week. This is one that, 2 days after I got back from Japan, I got a text from our good pal Dan Reichert, one of the heads over at Giant Bomb, former Game Informer editor himself, saying like, hey, let's have a retro game night. Because a few months ago, I went out with him and a few other folks, Ben Hansen over at MinMax, another former Game Informer editor, Wade Rosen, the CEO of Atari, and James Stevenson over at Insomniac Games. They're all, we're all based in Minnesota. So we got together, had a nice dinner. And over the course of that dinner a few months ago, it was like, hey, we should get together and just play like retro games. So we finally did that 2 days after, or the day after I got back from Japan. So drove over to Dan Reichert's house. He has the most unbelievable setup of all time. We played all kinds of like terrible retro games, also a few really good ones. But like, at the end of it, Ben Hansen goes, hey, there's this game on Switch that we should absolutely play. It's a multiplayer game. And if I've learned one thing from all my years of working with Ben Hansen, it's that he has a piercing laugh. But if there's two things that I've learned from all my years of working with Ben Hansen and being his friend, it's that he has good game recommendations. And this is no different from that. It's called Astro Duel 2. And it's a local multiplayer game. And it is one of the best party games I've played. So it's like a platforming, like it's like an action platforming, like multiplayer arena game. And you can jump around and everybody has their own like sword that they can swipe. But then you also have like, you can pick up like rocket launchers and power-ups and everything. You can blast at each other. But that's just the start because like, you know, you want to be the last person standing. You want to have the most eliminations. And at the end of the round, like whoever gets points, like it shows like a top down, like racing view almost. And you like move forward and the person who crosses the finish line. So like, you know, you get the most eliminations without being eliminated yourself. That gets you like one notch towards the finish line. And the person who hits the finish line first wins. So that's just the start because then there's most of the levels you jump outside of like the platforming area and you jump out into space and your character turns into a spaceship. And then you're going around firing at each other. It is so tense. Cool. You can get different power-ups that will blast through the land. So like if somebody's just like, you know, turtling and like hiding in like the land area, you can actually get a power up and blast a laser that just pierces through the entire thing and hit them if you're accurate enough. But then like, you know, if you're on the ground in there, you're like, oh my God. And like, you're like dodging out of the way of the laser. And then like, if you destroy the ship, they don't instantly die. Instead, they're just a person floating out into space and you have like a couple of seconds you can finish them off. Otherwise their ship regenerates and then they're back at it. There's different classes of ships that you can select. So you can choose like a light, medium, or heavy ship that all have different like abilities and powers. And yeah, it was just chaos at its best. And it was so much fun. I don't even have anybody to play this with locally. And I still bought it on my Switch because it was that much fun. The developer, or at least the publisher, is Wild Rooster. And it's been on Steam for a while, but it looks like it came to Switch March of this year. And it's $20 normally. It has kind of like that pixel art aesthetic, but right now through August 12th, it is on sale for $15.
Ooh, might pick it up.
But yeah, it is like if you have somebody to play video games with you locally, this is an easy recommendation, especially if you have like a group of up to 4. I think it actually may go to 6 players. Yeah, it's 6 players local that you can do this in. And yeah, so there's versus mode of up to 6 players with full bot support, which I guess I'll take advantage of that, but it's not going to be as fun. There's bounty mode, which is a 1 to 3 player co-op adventure. And then there's cash grab where you can buy equipment between rounds. So it's just extremely fun. Cannot recommend this game enough if you have like friends to play. I might even fire it up tonight and play solo. That's how much I like it.
Nice.
But yeah, came to Switch in March, $20 normally. It is $15 on sale through August 12th. But Wes, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of All Things Nintendo.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a blast, and I've got more time than ever now. So if you ever need a host, hit me up. I'm sure I'll check my very, very busy calendar and see what's going on.
Well, hey, maybe I'll have you on All Things Gamers because that's going to be typically a solo show. But if you're playing anything fun that you want to talk about, I know there's a lot of games on the horizon.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy second half of this year. It's I was really looking forward to it, especially from a coverage perspective. And I don't know, maybe it'll be cool now if I just have to play a game and not put my thoughts out there. I can just keep things to myself and have fun. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm looking forward to playing like non-Nintendo games like Metaphor and Assassin's Creed and Star Wars
Dragon
Outlaws.
Age. Yeah, Dragon Age. Star Wars Outlaws is like 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks.
Soon, you know?
Crazy.
So maybe I'll talk about all those on All Things Gamers, which, again, if you want to support the show, the best way is to sign up for either the $5 or $10 tier on Patreon. You get bonuses over there as well. But that is our show for this week. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get more All Things Nintendo content, become a patron of the All Things Nintendo podcast Patreon. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. Hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea, or join the All Things Nintendo Discord server, which is a perk for subscribing to the paid tier of the All Things Nintendo Patreon. Also, be sure to find All Things Nintendo on YouTube and subscribe to that channel. You can just search for All Things Nintendo or visit at Brian P. Shea on YouTube. Wes, do you have anything else you'd like to plug before we wrap up here?
No, just hit me up on Twitter if you've got opportunities, or you can just hit me up and we could talk games at LeBlanc Wes. Yeah, I'm Wesley Leblanc on LinkedIn. I'm open to work. Hashtag open to work.
I am as well
on LinkedIn.
And that is our show for this week. Thank you again so much for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. All right, before we wrap up this episode, I do want to shout out the $10 patrons of the All Things Nintendo podcast. Again, we just launched this tier this week, and the response has been overwhelming. So big thanks to Aaron, Born Orpheus, Brooke, Chaps My Ass, Christopher Tudor, Colton Breadlow, Drunk on Mako, Ian T. Clark, Joar Hello, Jill Grote, Johnny Five, Joseph, Justin Childress, Cody Gibson, Megan, Toad, Pat, Sarah, Smithy Poo, Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man, Zach Marcus, and Zachary Pliggy. You, along with the $5 patrons that are listed in the episode description, help make this show possible. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I hope you enjoy the episodes.